So this is part 3 of Avonelle Hawke's oral history. Avonelle was born on January 1924. So before we get started, I think he wanted to supplement some of the things we talked about last time.
Yes, as I recalled thinking about our conversation, I do remember a couple of little treats that came along. First of all, I remember we had a cart that came along. I don't remember whether it was drawn by a donkey or how it was brought up, but it was a little cart, and they sold cimarrones. Now, a cimarrone is just about the same thing as today's shaved ice with the syrup over it. What do they call them? Snow cones. And they come by, and I forget how much they were, just a few pennies, but they give you a paper cone and they put shaved ice in it, and then they pour what kind of syrup you wanted over it, cherry or lemon or whatever. And we just love those cimarrones. And then the other thing that I just have a vague memory of is a cart that would come by. I don't know whether it was Day but I remember one coming by, and it had a little bell that rang when they came by your house. And the kids, if they had any pennies or any money of any kind, would run out and get an ice cream treat. So I do remember those treats that were offered to us when we were kids. And then the other thing that I remembered so well later, after we talked, was the fact that we did have a Victrola, and we called it a Victrola or a record. We didn't call them record players then, just phonographs or Victrolas. And then they had that little dog that represented the Victrola that looked like a penny. Really, it looked like Beverly and Mark's penny. But we had an interesting thing with that Victrola. When I was about 6 or 7, I remember being fascinated by something that my mother had bought. And it was something cut out of, it was stiff, it was like cardboard. And it was cut out like Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire dancing together. And you would attach that to your record somehow. And as it played and went around on the Victrola, you'd put it up so it would put the shadow would go on the wall. And you'd watch these dancers go around as the record player played the record music. And it was fascinating. In fact, I was talking about that yesterday with some of the people here at the Adult Center, and they couldn't believe it. They said, "Why, we've never heard of such a thing." But that was very much a pleasure for me when I was 6 and 7 years old, watching those two dancing. And I think that was about it that I remembered that I deleted last time.
And where did you say you got those figures?
I don't know where my mother bought them, but she had to have found them at someplace because we had it, and I don't remember it later in my life, but it was present in my life around the age of 6 to 8 years old.
Interesting. Okay, I'd like to start talking to you about this session about your church life and also your school life at this point, before you were 13 and your life changed. So let's talk about church first. What was your church life like?
Where? It was down on 9th Street, and we lived at the corner of 19th Street. So that was 10 blocks away, down toward town. We met every Saturday morning.
Hey, let me stop you. Let's back up and get a little higher level. You were Seventh-day Adventists, is that correct? Okay, Tell me about how that happened, given that your mother grew up in a family. Talk about your mother first. She grew up in a family of Methodists, correct?
Right, very devout Wesleyan Methodist, John Wesley. in his Methodist church. My grandfather was a very devout Methodist. He preached on a Sunday to the little village churches that didn't have pastors. And he'd go out on horseback and with his Bible and teach and preach to them. He studied the scriptures all the time. So she was brought up in by a very devout Methodist Christian grandfather, her father.
So Daddy Tonner was a lay circuit preacher.
Yes, yes. He loved the Lord. And I have always assumed that Grandma Tonner, that Mommy Tonner was also a Methodist. She certainly was born in an area or two in an ethnic background that were very Methodist.
So I would think that sort of, I'm going to use air quotes when I say this for people listening, that I would think that fundamentalist Methodists would not have had a very good opinion of Seventh-day Adventists. So
well,
how did your mother, who grew up in a, again, air quotes, fundamental Methodist home, become a Seventh-day Adventist? Do you have any idea?
Yes, I know the story. All I know is what I have heard from the family over all the years. And that is that when she was a teenager, she visited one summer her aunt, which was her mother's sister, Ella Evans. I don't remember her married name, but she visited her one summer, and her Aunt Ella was an Adventist. Now that was on her mother's side. And during that time she visited her Aunt Ella, her aunt converted her to Adventism. And my mother stayed with that the rest of her life until she died at 45.
I'm sorry, how old was your mother at this time?
She was a teenager. I don't know exactly her age.
Okay, so when your mother met your father, she was already an Adventist.
Yes, apparently so. Apparently so.
So this had nothing to do with your father's family.
No, nothing.
Okay, so talk to us about Seventh-day Adventism and how it differs from, I guess, again, using air quotes, mainstream Protestantism.
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm not real clear, but I do know some of the differences, obviously. We met on Saturday instead of Sunday, and they called it the Sabbath day. And they believed in both the Old and New Testaments, very much so. They taught Jesus Christ crucified, dead, and buried, and resurrected. But they emphasized the Old Testament much more than they did the New Testament. And they followed, it seemed like they followed the Old Testament dietary laws like the Jews do, or did, or I don't know. So we were not supposed to eat pork. They tended to be vegetarians, vegans. They were very conscious of their diet. What else? Oh, they did the foot bathing, which other denominations in the Protestantism observe periodic. The food bathing of the feet, as Jesus did with his disciples. They sang the old gospel songs like most Protestant denominations did. We had what we call Sabbath school, the children did, and that was the same as Sunday school. And the adults had their Sabbath school, and we had ours. They did not have seminary, as I understand it. They do not have seminary trained pastors in the pulpit. They were always taught on Saturday morning by what people they called elders. It was elder so-and-so and elder so-and-so. We never had what we called pastors or reverends or preachers. They were elders, and they gave us our lesson for the week on Saturday morning.
So these people, these elders were lay people. In other words, they had other jobs.
Yes.
That was just within the church, that was their function, and presumably they were more learned than the other people in the church. So,
yes, that's what I understand. Now, I could be a little wrong on some of the details, but we did have elders who taught us. And I remember elders coming to the house and greeting the baby Avonelle when she was born, because it's in my baby book. Elder so-and-so visited elder so-and-so. And I think an elder came to the hospital before my mother died and ministered to her.
Now, you mentioned that Adventists don't eat pork, but you also mentioned that your mother made chorizo and eggs.
Yeah, that's right.
Chorizo is made out of pork, so
that's right.
And also she made chicken and dumplings, so you clearly had other meats in your home. So it sounds like your mother wasn't, extremely strict with regard to the dietary rules.
Cut as one, yeah.
And
my grandparents ate bacon and pork and whatever.
Yeah. So, but when you went to El Paso and you ate your bacon and you said, "I'm eating lots of hell," was your mother there at the time?
I'm sure she was. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so she was clearly quite relaxed about those.
Obviously.
Those strictures, yeah, at home anyway.
Obviously.
Yeah. Now, what did the Adventists think about sorts of normal forms of entertainment, like popular music, dancing, card playing, things like that? What was their attitude?
Well, I have an interesting story that I don't think I've ever told you kids. I never thought of it. As I say, I collected sheet music from an early age. I loved it. And but when I was able to have a little bit of change, I'd buy some sheet music to the musicals that were on the screen. And we had a dining room table and a buffet in our dining room in the house. And the buffet had cabinets on either side, which the present one in my apartment has. And I had stacks of sheet music. Even before my mother died, I had these stacks of sheet music. And I remember one day remember, I'm just a child, but I was convicted that sheet music was sinful. Now, why? I do not know. I have no reason to tell you that I did, except I remember the incident. And being that I thought it was sinful, I thought I should throw it away. So I started taking some of that sheet music and tearing it up and throwing it away because I thought it was sinful. And I can remember no other detail about it, except there was that incident one day. So whether it came from the church, I have no reason to imagine why I decided that day that it was a sinful thing to have it. Connected with that to the present, I remember when Kathy, my granddaughter, was dating Joe, and they were both very involved in their church group at the Baptist church. And they decided certain CDs and cassettes and things that they were listening to were really not proper for a Christian, so they were going to get rid of them. So I don't know, maybe there's a time in a Christian's child's life or in a church-going child's life where she decides certain things are for them sinful. I do not know. I don't know whether the church taught that or what, but that's what I thought.
Do you recall what stopped you from tearing up all the sheet music, or did you tear it all up? Do you remember?
No, I didn't tear it all up. I just started tearing some of it. Probably my mother told me to stop it. Okay. I don't know. I don't remember that.
Maybe every child goes through a fundamentalist phase, and yours lasted 2 minutes, not long enough to tear up all your music.
I don't know whether I was a real introspective child about spiritual things. I don't know. I have no idea.
But this story started with my asking you about generally the Adventist views of this sort of thing, of music, dancing, entertainment. Do they have any particular views on that? Were Adventists allowed to dance, for example?
I don't recall whether they barred the dancing or they certainly must not have. They must not have barred you from going to the movies, because we just love going to the movies. I don't know. I don't ever remember them actually teaching against dancing or movies or entertainment. I don't remember.
And if they did, it would have been reflected in your mother's behavior. You never noticed anything like that in her behavior, right?
Never.
I mean, you obviously turned out to be a great dancer, and Dad, and you danced your feet off most of your life. Did your mother? I know she liked music and loved to sing. Did she evince any desire to dance or ability to dance?
I never saw her move around like she was dancing at all. Never saw that.
Okay, so let's get to your church life. So how much of your Saturday was taken up by church? Do you recall?
Probably all morning, as I remember.
And would there be?
I remember two names for two people from that church experience. I remember a Mrs. Dotson. For some reason, I remember her, and she was so sweet and so kind. And then I remember the lady and her little girl that we always sat next to in the church service. She was a Mexican lady, and I don't know whether she was a widow and her husband and she didn't have a husband living, or whether she had one and he didn't come. I don't know, but it was only the woman and her little girl, and I just loved those two people. We sat with them in church every Saturday.
And what? Obviously, you said she was a Latina, but was the church pretty much Anglo? The makeup of the church, very white.
Yes.
Okay. I did forget to ask you, do the Adventists believe in baptism and sort of,
I don't ever remember a baptism in the church. My grandpa, Daddy Tonner, baptized me.
Okay. How old are you? Do you remember?
No, I don't, but I was a child and a young child, and it was not a immersion. It was just, with the head with the water.
Yeah.
And then I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
It'd be very interesting to learn more about that, because he may have been, Methodists believe in baptism, perhaps Adventists don't. So he felt a need to do that. And your mom,
I don't know.
I was wondering what your mom thought about that at the time.
Have no idea. Methodists believed in infant baptism. Later on, since there's been such a difference between the Protestant denominations about baptism, later on, I think they said, well, we're just dedicating the child, not baptizing them. And but of course, true baptism is after the child has been old enough to accept Jesus.
Was there a youth group associated with the Adventists? Did you participate in a youth group?
Just Saturday mornings, Sabbath school.
Okay. And do you have had any good friends that you had associated with the church that you recall?
No, not child. You mean childhood friends?
Yes.
No.
So your basic friends continued to be just children who lived around you, or maybe we're going to talk about school in a minute. So maybe
in my neighborhood, in school.
Yeah. Okay. And you said occasionally somebody from the church would visit you at the house.
Anyone?
Occasionally, someone from the church would visit you at the house.
I don't remember ever.
Elder. Okay.
They did when I was born. I know, because my mother has it in my baby book. I still have my baby book. In fact, I think you took it. You have it. They came to visit when I was born, but I don't recall them visiting during my childhood. No.
But your mother did play the piano at the services.
Oh, yeah, she played the piano for the singing in our church service.
So you would sit quietly in the pew waiting for her to come back after she was finished?
Uh-huh.
Do you remember your attitude during the services? Were you bored like most children are in church?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember your attitude during the church services? Were you bored like most children are in church?
No.
Doesn't ring a bell. Okay. All right, well, let's move on to your schooling. All right. Before you were, before you were 13, basically, your grade schooling. What school did you go to?
Well, I was a mid-year starter because of my birth date. In those days, Tucson schools would let you start school in the middle of the year if you turned 6 in time. And so I started school right after my 6th birthday in 1930. I took first, let me get some water. I had first and second grade at University High School at Maryland Park. And Caroline Halliday was my first grade teacher. She was the meanest, most unkind person to start school with. But fortunately, I only had her for first grade. And we moved during my second grade. I was what they call double promoted when we moved. And they did that in those days, which I'm not so sure was very wise. Because they said I was ahead of the second graders. And so I started my next part of schooling at Elizabeth Wharton School on 22nd Street.
Okay, let me interrupt you. You say when you moved from where to where?
We moved from 1516 East Speedway to 908 South Park.
Okay, well, that's new information. Okay, you didn't live on South Park the whole time. You started out at 1516 East Speedway.
First, we rented a house on 1516 East Speedway for just as I remember a year or two, and then moved into the house that was on Park.
This was after your dad passed away.
After my dad died.
Okay, so when your dad was still alive, you were at 1516 East Speedway.
When my dad was alive, we were at 908 South Park. Now, don't ask me why we moved to Speedway for a year or two. I don't know.
Okay.
I have no clue.
Okay, well, that's interesting to know. All right, filling in the blanks here. So
What?
while you're at 50, filling in the blanks, we're filling in the blanks.
Yeah.
So when you were at 1516 East Speedway, you went to University Heights School.
University High School.
Okay, and then you moved back to South Park.
Went back to South Park and went and started going to Elizabeth Wharton School on 22nd Street.
Okay, so when you were at University Heights School, that was 10 blocks away from 1516 East Speedway, right?
Yeah, I and that always puzzled me. How did I get to school and back? I don't know, because it was on a busy street, the Speedway.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember how I got to school and back.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And okay, so now you're at Borden, and that's at 22nd, which is how many blocks away from your South Park house?
Well, 19th Street to 22nd Street.
Right. So you had to walk 3 blocks.
Uh-huh.
Right. And so did you walk alone usually, or did you walk with somebody who was
It seemed like Dorothy moved shortly after that and moved into the house next door, and she joined me going to school then. We went together to school.
Okay, so you were the same class, same age?
Yeah, we were the same class.
Okay. Okay.
Mrs. Reinerson.
Okay. So at this point, you're in the 3rd grade, but are you young for the grade because you skipped?
Yes.
Okay.
So was Dorothy.
Okay. Do you recall that making a difference?
No.
Hmm. Okay. Now, tell me about the ethnic makeup of your schoolmates. Tell me about the ethnic makeup of your schoolmates.
Well, let's see, I think we had George Thomas was a Welsh boy. He was Anglo, and Emily McCullough was a Czechoslovakian immigrant. Uh, uh, I had a lifelong little relationship with her. She became a teacher. Um, who else? Oh, Dorothy Aldrich was half Anglo, half Mexican. And really, literally, the rest of them were Mexican or Mexican American.
Hmm. So, was there a lot of Spanish spoken at the school?
Oh, yeah, it wasn't supposed to. It was against the rules of the school district. But of course, out at recess time and playtime, the Mexican kids spoke their Mexican language, and
Mhm.
but it was not allowed supposedly, but they did.
And were there any issues that you remember? Any problems?
Um, not really. If they would get put out with me about something, and they would poke me with their elbows, or they would look at me real mean and start talking Mexican in my face, and I didn't know what they were saying, so I don't know. It was just kid stuff,
Mhm.
nothing serious, just kid stuff.
And at that time, elementary school went through what grade?
Sixth grade, we went through
Sixth
sixth.
grade. Okay, so you were pretty much uh, were you in seventh grade when your mom passed away? Do you remember? Or
No, I
13?
was starting ninth grade.
Oh, that's because you had advanced. That's right.
Yes,
So you were 13 and going into ninth grade.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because usually 15-year-olds start ninth grade. Yeah.
No, I was 13.
Okay. So even though had been promoted, did you still find school pretty easy?
Uh, School was pretty easy. I didn't work at it. I didn't make straight A's
Mhm.
by any means. I I loved I loved spelling, and I always loved being number one in the spelling class.
Mhm.
And I loved reading, and I loved I just loved computation, basic arithmetic, adding, subtracting, dividing. I loved that,
Mhm.
and I wasn't crazy about history and geography. I could have dispensed with that at the time, and I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
After being a semi-world traveler, I wish I had been more interested. Um, I love school.
Mhm. So every summer when the summer was ending and you were about to go to school, you actually were looking forward to it.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Oh my, okay.
It hardly wait.
Yeah, you did not pass that along to me.
Sorry.
Now, was music offered as a course in school?
Oh, yes, it was emphasized.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes, we had a whole period where we would put our heads down on our desks and listen to recordings, and most of them were classic.
Mhm. So it was mostly music appreciation.
Yeah, music appreciation.
Right.
Not mostly, but definitely all of it.
Okay, so there was no school band, there was no music instruction
No,
like
no, they
like
didn't
I had
offer
it.
instruction,
Mhm.
but um, they did have a wonderful program. Oh, they all the well, of course, how many were there? The elementary schools in Tucson had this music appreciation every day in the classrooms, and then we had a director, Mr. Schultz. He directed this program, and they would once a year gather all the elementary students in the buses and take them to the Safford Junior High School auditorium. And all the elementary school kids would sit in the auditorium, and they, up on the stage, they would play these different classic recordings. And you had a test that you took during that time. And they had taught you to identify the different instruments, what they were named, and the different parts of the recordings. and you had to know the name of the recording. And it was just a regular test over this music appreciation. And then if you passed the test, you got a little pin. And we really coveted that pin. And it was just a marvelous music program.
And this was required.
What?
This was required of all students.
Yes, that was part of our schooling.
Okay.
Just like physical education was, just like we had an art class.
So you had a physical education, and that was that more than just recess and running out and going wild, or was there actually a physical education class?
Where really it was mostly recess, Frank.
Yeah, okay. But you had an art class as well.
Where our art class was giving you a piece of construction paper and some colors. It wasn't really a serious.
Right. So there wasn't like kind of art appreciation like you had music appreciation. It was really focused on music, it seems like.
Right.
Now, did you have after school activities that you participated in?
No.
How about programs, like seasonal programs that were there organized? For example, was there a Christmas pageant or Christmas program?
I remember just one Christmas involving the whole school. And I don't remember at what stage or what class level I was, but we had a Christmas tree in the center of the long hall at our school. We had a long hall with classrooms on either side. And they put up a big Christmas tree. I don't remember it one time. And I was chosen to memorize the night before Christmas and stand by that Christmas tree for part of the Christmas program. And recite it.
And so you memorized the entire poem?
Oh, the whole thing.
My gosh. You were clearly an outstanding student for them to have chosen you for that reason.
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I didn't, at least I do not remember being, no.
So of all the children they could have chosen to do that, they chose you, but you don't remember being outstanding in any way.
No, I don't.
Okay. Now this gets us back to a question about Adventism that I forgot to ask about, the traditional Christian holidays. What was the Adventist attitude toward those?
They did not celebrate Christmas and they did not celebrate Easter. I don't ever remember having a Christmas tree or being given gifts at Christmas. We didn't celebrate it. Now, my mother abided by that.
But yet she didn't mind you participating in the Christmas program at the school.
That's a real puzzle. No, she never, she was quite proud.
Well, I don't think that might be a puzzle to us, but back then I think people were probably much more relaxed about, living amongst people in society who were different from they were, and just, not making a big deal out of it. Yeah, I would think so. So Christmas, Easter, did they celebrate any Christian related holidays that you recall?
Was it what?
Did they celebrate any Christian holidays that you recall?
Not that I'm aware of, not that I remember.
Okay, so there was no special occasion to mark the birth of Christ, or no special occasion to mark his crucifixion and resurrection? Not
that I remember. Now, maybe the elders preached it. I don't remember.
Interesting. Okay. So you go into junior high school, 7th grade, when you're basically 12 years old?
Let's see. In 1937, I started 9th grade. 1936, I was 11 years old.
Okay. And so that was a different school. What school was that?
Safford Junior High School.
Okay. And how far was that from your house?
It was a long distance. It was from Park Avenue to 5th Street, which would have been 5 blocks. And probably from 19th Street to 10th Street.
Wow. Okay, there's a distance.
Yeah.
And
it seems to me by the time I went into 7th grade, somehow we had that little blue Essex, and Mama used to take me to school.
Oh, okay. You got driven to school by your mom.
Yeah.
Oh,
In
okay.
fact, in fact, I don't know whether you remember my telling you that I reconnected with a classmate from Safford, Rosemary Bierce, who was inducted in the Arizona Music Hall of Fame along with George, and she was a musician all her life, and in fact played in a band out at Little Abner's for years. Um, she reconnected with me, and she's one of her memories when we had lunch together was she said, "I remember your mother so devoted to you." She said she would come and bring you to school every day at Stafford, and she said, "I remember how affectionate she was to you," and that made me feel so good.
Yeah, that's nice. And do you recall the transition from elementary school to junior high school being a major transition, a difficult transition? How different was it in your memory?
Frank, I don't know what kind of a gene that God put in me that those things never seemed to bother me. It was just a natural occurrence in my life. Some of the kids that I grew up with went to junior high school, and I went to junior high school. That was a natural occurrence in my life, as far as I was concerned.
So all your friends and kids you knew from Borden went to the same school,
Yeah,
Safford,
right. And
Um,
I met new ones like Billy Crowell and Raymond Plunk and some of those boys that I had lifelong relationships with reunions. I met them, and it was in junior high school that I was in a play. Uh, I think I still have the script in my scrapbook somewhere. I just loved being in that play. I thought that was more fun, and I memorized that part. And, I had the female lead in it, and oh, I just loved it.
do you remember the play, the name of it?
What was the name of that play? No, I don't.
Now, so junior high school was what grade? 7, 8, and 9?
7th, 8th, and 9th.
Okay, so you were there 3 years.
Well, 2 years I was there.
Okay, and then what happened?
Well, Mama died, and I moved to Mansfield.
Oh, okay, that's okay. So again, was the ethnic makeup of the school similar to Borden, mostly Latino?
Right. It was on the south, what we call the south side of town, which was where most of the Latinos lived.
Okay. So there would have been other schools that wouldn't have been so Latino, perhaps, in town.
Oh, yeah, right. The kids that went to Mansfield weren't any part of that town, and the kids that went to Roscouche weren't. Roscouche was right across from Tucson High, or practically across from it. And Mansfield was east of Tucson High.
Okay. And at this time, I think you told me before that the black kids in junior high and elementary school had separate schools. Is that true?
Yes, they were separated by Dunbar School.
Okay. So Dunbar was the elementary school?
Elementary and junior high.
Okay, for the black kids in town. Okay. And then in high school, you all came together at Tucson High.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, I left something out with my grade school. We had a lady who kept the girls' restrooms clean and monitored the girls' restroom. Her name was Mrs. Drake, and she was a black woman. I adored her. She was the sweetest woman, and she was so kind and so great to all of us kids. And I just have never forgotten her.
I'm waiting for the clock to stop chiming.
What?
I'm waiting for my clock to stop chiming. There we go. So what that indicates to me is that some things did change in junior high school. For example, you had plays that you could participate in, which were.
Well, it changed, but it just came naturally.
No, I'm just trying to figure out what junior high school looked like.
And I also studied and played the clarinet in the 7th grade.
Okay. So was that again a music, is that part of the school, a curriculum, or was that extracurricular?
No, that was part of the school. We could choose an instrument to play, and we played.
Okay, and you had a band?
No, I don't remember a band. I just remember learning to play the clarinet.
So it was just individual instruction?
Well, it must have been because I don't remember a band. Uh, I remember learning how to put the reed on the clarinet, licking it and putting the reed on, and learning about how the different keys on the clarinet. I don't remember being any good on it, but I liked it. I enjoyed it.
And throughout this period, you're spending a lot of your extra time on the piano, I assume.
Oh yeah, I was still playing the piano.
And were you still taking formal lessons from teachers? And
Yeah.
so by the time you're in 7th or 8th grade, just generally speaking, what level were you at on the piano? What were you playing that you can recall?
Oh, I really don't recall the names of anything I was playing, but I was like, the teacher was giving me classical music and not, I wasn't playing Brahms and Tchaikovsky and Chopin, but I was playing some classical music, and coming right along and playing in a piano recital every year and enjoying it. Yeah.
Good. Okay. But you were spending a lot of your extra time doing that, I imagine, during this period.
Well, I always liked to be involved in things at school. I just enjoyed being with the kids, and whatever came up that I could be involved in, I participated.
Would you play the piano every day?
Probably so. I don't specifically remember it, but I'm sure I did because I loved it.
So you're studying the clarinet. You had this play you were in. I imagine the play was extracurricular, I imagine.
Oh, no, well, I guess we took dramatic art in junior high school. And they put this play on, and I remember our acting in it in a school auditorium before the student body. And I just had more fun with that.
Do you recall your mother coming to see you in the play?
Oh yes, she whatever came about in my life, my mother was there.
And at some point you started going to dances in your life, obviously. In junior high school, did they start having school dances at this point?
Well, not until after Mama died. And I started 9th grade at Mansfield. And in 9th grade, we started having social hour, we called it. And it was dancing. Boy and girl dancing together.
But you don't remember that at Safford?
No, not at all.
Okay. Even the 9th graders at Safford, you don't recall if they did it?
I don't recall what they did. I was just so involved in my own.
Okay. And again, was Dorothy very close to you? Did she go to Safford with you?
Well, after we went to Safford, our lives seemed to stretch out a little more, and we didn't have the close relationship at that time that we had in grade school. She made new friends, I made new friends. The kids from the VA hospital, kids of the doctors out there, like Aunt Mildred, they all went to Safford. They were bused in. And I remember one girl, her father was a doctor out at the hospital. We ate lunch together all the time. And one of the biggest things in my life for lunch was that bottled pimento cheese that is so yummy and good. Mama would buy that and put a thick layer of that on white bread and then a bunch of lettuce. And that's what I loved for my lunch at Safford. So we took sack lunches and we would sit outside and eat together.
So everybody brought their own lunch.
Yeah, they seemed to. I don't remember a cafeteria at Safford.
And so actually you knew Aunt Mildred back in junior high school?
No, I didn't know her then.
Okay.
She was way ahead of me. She was George's class, Uncle George.
Okay. I didn't realize she was in Tucson that early. I thought
they came to Tucson real early.
I had the impression she came to Tucson to go to college.
No. Dr. Wood decided with 4 children who he wanted to send to college. In order to be able to afford to send them to college, he'd have to be someplace where there was a university where they didn't have to pay high tuition. And at that time, he was at the VA hospital near Silver City, New Mexico. And so how he did it, I don't know. But anyway, he was appointed to be a doctor at the Tucson VA hospital. And that fit the bill perfectly for him, because therefore he could send his 4 kids to the U of A and not have to pay such high tuition.
And back then, was the VA on South 6th Avenue?
It was in the same place where it is now.
Okay.
In fact, I used to take a walk around the whole residential area out there on the grounds of the VA when Dad would take his heart rehabilitation. And I would go past the housing where Mildred lived when she was a child growing up.
Now, clearly this is a time when your social horizons are expanding.
I got my first boyfriend there.
Oh, okay. Talk to me.
What?
Go ahead.
When I was at Safford, there was a boy named Bill Downing, a redheaded boy, wouldn't you know, freckle face. And he used to drop notes in my locker. We had lockers in junior high school. And so when I'd open my locker to take my books out, here would be a note from Bill. And we started having boy-girl parties, birthday parties and stuff like that. And I guess it was about the 8th grade, and Bill would be there. And so he was my first boyfriend. We never had a date or did anything together. He just would drop me notes in my locker, and I don't ever recall ever writing a note back. But he was my first boy that drew my attention, let's put it that way. And so I figure he was my first boy that I paid any attention to.
Okay. So he was dropping notes and you just admitted you were paying attention to him. What does that mean? Does that mean?
Well, I just thought he was cute. And, I thought he was cuter than the other boys. And it didn't lead to anything, no dates or touching or anything like that.
So there was not even any hand holding.
No. I just thought he was a cute boy, cuter than the other boys. I started noticing boys as something different from just a buddy or
But did you demonstrate to him in any other fashion that you thought that he was cuter than the other boys?
No,
Did you?
No.
So poor old Bill was left out hanging.
Yeah, he just was wasting his time.
Oh, okay.
I was waiting for Dad.
So at the boy girl parties you talked about, you didn't gravitate toward him, didn't sit together or anything like that?
We just all played games together and had refreshments.
So poor old Bill was just left out hanging in the wind.
Yeah, I don't even remember what happened to him, or if I ever saw him after I left and went to Mansfield.
Okay, so this was the first in a long trail of broken hearts.
Oh no, okay. I didn't break any hearts.
So, well, this sounds like he broke Bill's. Anyway.
I'm sure he found somebody else to put notes in.
So anyway, my general point was, before you got off onto this great tangent, thank you, was that your social circle is obviously expanding here.
Yes, it was.
You're going to a school that's farther away. You're being driven there. You're now, around kids who are from different parts of Tucson. How was your social circle expanding? Were you spending more time at the school? Were you making friends that were farther away and spending time with them? Or were you still pretty much go to school, come home and stay close to home?
Well, I don't remember birthday parties every year, but I remember one in particular, for some reason, I don't know why. And I invited kids outside of my little compound where I lived. I think some of the things that I remember the most from Safford were a couple of my teachers and a couple of my classes. I remember Mrs. Richardson as being my homemaking teacher. We had to take sewing and cooking in 7th grade. I hated sewing. And the dress I ended up making, 2 of me could have gone into it. It was so big. Uh, I have a snapshot of myself in it. The first dress I ever made. It was horrible. And I hated the class. And I remember Arlene Sletty very well. Oh, she was a beautiful young woman. She was the choir teacher and the music teacher. And I did some accompanying for her the year or two that I was there. But oh, I thought Arlene was gorgeous. And I remember Mrs. Morton, her daughter ended up being one of my best friends in high school. She was a librarian. So I remember, oh, and also one of my shirt tail relatives taught there. Uncle Maynard's sister, Ida Flood Dodge, was the history teacher. And she taught Arizona history at Stafford Junior High. And she taught Arizona history. And we had to keep a notebook that we wrote in every day with notes about how Arizona became a state. And we had to read the Arizona Constitution that year. She was a very, very excellent teacher. And our textbook, she had written herself, Our Arizona.
We have a copy of that somewhere.
Well, I used to have a copy of it, and I don't know what happened to it. I think Tim Flood has a copy of it.
Mm-hmm. No, you used the term red shirt tail relative. Explain what that means.
That means she was a relative through marriage.
Okay, an in-law.
She was Uncle Maynard's sister, and Uncle Maynard was my uncle through my aunt, Anna Johnson.
Okay.
She was one of the first women graduates of the University of Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever go on any field trips that you recall?
At Stafford? No.
Mm-hmm. No field trips were sponsored outside the school.
No.
Okay. And who were your best friends from Stafford? Do you remember?
Rosemary Bierce was one of my friends. Who else? Well, Dorothy was still my friend. I don't really remember. Isn't that funny? No, I don't remember.
What else about the junior high school? Oh, you were already accompanying people on the piano when you were what, 12 or 13 years old? You were already getting experience accompanying?
Yeah, I was the choir, not people, but the choir. Arlene Study had a junior high school choir. She let me accompany once in a while.
Well, that must have been a great learning experience for you.
It was. I loved it. I took to it like fish to water.
Because I know that was kind of became your passion over time, was, you know, being an accompanist, which is its own thing for people that don't know, you know, in the piano world. Accompanying
it's a genre of its own.
It's its own art form.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you actually started early doing that and fell in love with it.
Right. And I did some of that at Mansfield my last year there in 9th grade. There were two of us who accompanied the choirs there, George Woods and myself.
Okay. Anything else about one thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned that the donkey would for the Cimarrones would pull the cart around. Do you recall back then that there were still a lot of horses in Tucson? Or was
I didn't see a lot of them.
So it was already mostly motor vehicles.
Yeah, right.
On the streets by then. Yeah.
Right.
And you mentioned Aunt Mildred being bused to Stafford. There was no busing service. Were you considered too close to the school to bus? Do you know?
Apparently not. Because no bus came by my house to take students there.
How did Dorothy get to school? Would your mom take her?
I don't remember at all. Isn't that funny?
You don't recall her going in the Essex with you?
It was only a 2-seater.
Oh, okay.
Well, we did have a rumble seat. Yeah, I remember that. No, I don't remember anything else about it.
And talk to me just before we end this session, about the kind of Tucson physically at this point in time. Is I believe there are only 20 to 25,000 people living in Tucson. Maybe by the time you're graduating from Safford, it's 30, 35,000. So, you lived on the south side, right? Which was 900 blocks or 1900 blocks south, 900 blocks South Park, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was 9 blocks south of Broadway.
Right.
Right. Was south of Broadway considered the south side at that time?
Pretty much,
Okay. And then north of Broadway, how far did Tucson go? Do you recall?
Oh, well, it went north beyond Speedway, but not far. I'm not sure it went to Grant even. Certainly not beyond Grant Road, and maybe not that far. I never went out that far.
So you rarely crossed Broadway, would you say?
Rarely.
And 900 South Park, was that considered?
But let me think. Wait a minute. Is Congress north of Broadway?
That's a good question. But if you went to Congress and it was north of Broadway, it wasn't much north.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah. And 900 South Park, was that considered pretty far south? Were you pretty much on the south edge of town, or were there?
No, I think we probably didn't go past Campbell Avenue East, and probably you did go across the Santa Cruz Bridge West. There was some I think living activity there. Probably not as far as Grant, maybe close to Grant north. And then it went to 22nd Street, at least where my school was, south. That was pretty much my world.
Okay. So 12 blocks south of Broadway, and then maybe as far north to Grant, but probably not. And then Campbell on the east side to basically where the freeway is now on the west side. Probably.
I don't remember Campbell on the east side, except from what Dad has always said, that as a kid, he went out to Campbell Avenue to shoot jackrabbits.
Okay, so you're already able to shoot jackrabbits when you got to Campbell Avenue.
I didn't shoot.
I said one could shoot rabbits at Campbell Avenue.
That's right, exactly.
Okay. And then, but downtown Tucson was quite lively at that time. People would sort of congregate in downtown Tucson.
It was a lively little town.
Yeah. So
mostly along Congress Street.
And what could you talk to me about some of the places you would go, some of the popular places and things to do in downtown Tucson?
There was the Rialto Theater, the Opera House. There were, for movie theaters, there was a Fox Theater just down west of Pennington Street, or Stone Avenue, I should say, not Pennington. There was the Hour Drugstore. I remember that on Congress. That was a big pharmacy drugstore. There was T.Ed Lit drugstore on the corner of Stone and Congress. There was a Valley National Bank that came along while I was with that Aunt and Uncle Maynard. The big bank was Southern Arizona Bank on Stone Avenue. There was the White House, Myerson's, which was down west. It was about where the Fox Theater, or maybe even west of that on the opposite side of the street. It was called Myerson's, but it was also called the White House. There was Daniel's Jewelry. They had a big standing clock in front of Daniel's Jewelry. There were a couple of Indian curio shops. There was Cress's, the 5 and dime store was on Congress Street. Woolworths, another 5 and dime, was on Congress Street. Dave Blumenson's men's clothing was on Congress. Learner's women's clothing was on Congress.
Was Grunwald and Adams already in town?
It was called Greenwald's Inn, Green, Greenwald's Jewelry Store. It was the only fine jewelry store in town that handled sterling and silver and crystal and stuff like that too. It was later sold or taken over by Abby Grunwald. Then there was what was that? Inexpensive women's store, Lerner's women's store. There was Gus Taylor's, which was a more upgrade women's store where I bought my wedding suit. But there was a shoe store that was inexpensive that was on Congress Street. Oh, how I was attracted to high heel shoes. I loved them. That was about it. And there was a big restaurant on, I don't remember what it was called, on Congress Street. One of the strange things I remember as a child growing up was that if you had a car, one of the entertainment venues for people, now are you ready for this? It's real entertainment, was to go down and find a parking place in the middle of Congress Street and watch people walk by. Now that was entertainment in those days.
Today that's called Las Vegas. I mean, if you want to,
I guess, yeah.
I think people watching has been one of the great. A, it's free, and B, it is entertaining. So I think it's been one of the great entertainments in human history. So
yeah,
this is where it took place in Tucson. Just
is that funny?
Oh yeah. Was there a even in junior high school, were you ever allowed to go downtown by yourself and do anything?
Oh no, not in junior high school.
No, okay. Okay.
High school, I've been downtown by myself.
Sure, we'll get to that. Was there now I know later on I think it was later on, you used to go to the White Mountains, to the Apache reservation, but that was later on in high school. Your friend's father was the.
I never went out there until I was in college.
Okay, we'll get to that later then. But you know, did you have an
Indian presence?
Yeah, I mean, were you aware that you were in a part of the world where Native Americans had a very rich and abundant history, and they were kind of around you? Did you see them? Did you sense them?
No idea.
No idea.
I was just very, what do you call it, provincial?
Mm-hmm.
Very no, my world was very small.
And were you aware that there were special schools for Black kids?
No.
Prior to the high school, you just
saw know that. Oh, in high school they came to school with us.
Sure, but prior to that, you weren't aware that there were Black kids going to school in different schools in town. You never ran across them or anything.
No.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when you got to high school and you saw Black kids, did you think, where did they come from? Or do you recall even thinking about it?
No, I didn't even think about it. They were part of the classes. Mm-hmm. Now, interestingly enough, Black kids had their own homeroom periods. We had homeroom where we would maybe have parties away from school once or twice a year in somebody's home, and where we would just kind of have a home period where we were all one group. Interestingly enough, they separated us for homerooms, and they separated us for choirs and music organizations. Now, why in the world, I do not know.
I can see the Black kids not wanting the white kids in their music programs. Just joking. Maybe not. Not at this time, all the way up until your mom died, were you still going to the movies with her whenever they'd come out? And
oh yeah.
And by mostly musicals, or were you going to see all sorts of
musicals?
Okay, so this continued all the way up until she passed.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Do you remember at some point radio entertainment becoming a bigger part of your life?
No.
So you don't ever recall, sort of like a lot of Americans too, kind of gathering on the radio, because there would be these weekly shows and that you pay attention to, every week and get all excited about, or there would be, the Bob Hope show or the Judy Garland show or whatever?
Dad remembers that very well in his home. I don't ever remember that in my home.
Really? You don't even remember having a radio in your home?
No.
Interesting. But you did have a record player?
Yes.
For sure. Okay.
And a piano.
Okay. Also, were there parts of town that were considered bad parts of town you didn't want to go to? Do you recall?
I was never told that, and I never realized it as a child. No.
Okay.
The first time I ever realized there was a different part of town was when I was living at Mayor's, and their kids, their first two sons had already grown up and had children. One of them was a doctor, Clyde Flood, here in Tucson, and he had two little babies, Mike and Pat. And I babysat them once in a while, but they lived down in what we call Snob Hollow, down on House Redondo. And just west of them, I was told, was a red light district. And I said, well, what's that? Why do they call it red light district? Well, there are people down there who do things that are not right, good. They're bad. And you stay away from it. And I honestly didn't know what they meant by prostitute. I don't know even if they use that word, because I didn't know what it meant. But Dad remembers that because he delivered soft drinks to them when he was about 14.
Now, this was west of Snob Hollow.
Yes.
And Snob Hollow is west of downtown, just west of downtown.
Well, it was down in where the government buildings are today, down around
right.
Main Street and Congress.
Right, and Snob Hollow are those really nice houses right on the western edge of that.
Oh yeah,
and
that's where the old prestigious homes were.
Right, and you're saying just west of Snob Hollow was the red light district.
Yeah, right.
Okay, that would have been around the Santa Cruz River then, probably.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Now, did you ever get an idea, or did anybody tell you that where you grew up was kind of the poor part of town?
Yeah, now I don't know whether that comes from my being an adult and hearing it or not. At the time I lived there, no, I didn't have any idea what part of town it was. Not while I was living there, huh?
And was there any sense back then, you remember, of crime being a problem, or there being gangs or anything like that that you were aware of? Never. And so were you kind of just allowed to roam freely, or did your mother have strict rules about?
Oh, no, I was not to go away from the home.
Okay. But even when you got into junior high school, you were a little older, your mom was still pretty strict about keeping you.
Yeah.
You were either at school or you were at home. Was that the rule?
That's right. Exactly. Or I'm with her at the movies.
Or the occasional chaperoned event, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So your life, your world at this time before going to Mansfield was pretty circumscribed.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And so even if bad parts of town had existed, or there were crime problems, you necessarily wouldn't even been aware of them.
Well, I wouldn't be aware of it, huh?
So you were pretty cloistered, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to end it here, this session. And next session, we're going to start with, big transition in your life in many ways. One person left your life and one person came into your life. That we're going to talk about starting next session.
My life changed.
Right. But before that, was anything else you can think of?
There's probably a lot that I could think of if I gave it a lot of time, but it was a very simple life, Frank, and I can't imagine anybody being even interested in it, except my own kids.
Well, I think anybody who lives in this life today would be naturally interested in a simpler life, hearing about it. Okay, great. Well, this ends part 3, and we'll take it up next time. Love you.
Okay, love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.